I never thought I would betray Ethan. He was everything a woman could ask for. Charming, successful, and devoted. The kind of man who made me feel like I was the only woman in the world. And yet, even in the most perfect relationships, cracks could form in places you least expected. Maybe it was boredom. Maybe it was curiosity. Or maybe it was just her. The first time I saw Lila, something inside me shifted. It wasn't love at first sight, nor was it simple admiration. It was hunger. A pull I couldn't explain. A whisper of something dark and unspoken beneath the surface. She was different from the people in our circle, confident without trying, with sharp blue eyes that held secrets I wanted to unravel. When Ethan introduced her as an old friend, I noticed the way his fingers tensed slightly around his glass, the way his jaw clenched just enough for me to wonder. Lila's gaze lingered on mine for a second too long when we shook hands. "So this is your wife," she mused, her voice smooth like expensive wine. "She's even more stunning than I imagined." I laughed it off, but my stomach twisted at the way her fingers dragged just a second longer before letting go. That should have been the end of it. A fleeting encounter, a harmless curiosity. But then she found me on social media. She slid into my messages the next day. "You ever feel like you're meant for something different?" Should have shut it down the moment I sensed the danger curling at the edges of her words. But I didn't. Instead, I played along. "I don't know what you mean." "That's a shame," she replied. "Because I think you do." I told myself it was harmless, that there was no real danger in indulging in conversation. After all, what was the worst that could happen? And then she invited me out for drinks. I hesitated. I hovered over my phone, rereading the message. Ethan was out of town for business. He wouldn't even know. Just one drink. The moment I hit send, my stomach flipped. The bar was dimly lit. The kind of place where people whispered secrets over expensive cocktails. Lila was already there when I arrived, sitting in a corner booth with a glass of bourbon in her hand. She smirked when she saw me, like she knew exactly how this night would end. "Glad you came," she said, pushing a drink toward me. I hesitated before taking a sip, the burn of alcohol doing nothing to steady my nerves. "Ethan's out of town." "I know," she replied smoothly. "That's why I asked." She leaned in, close enough that I could smell the faint trace of vanilla on her skin. "Tell me something, Jade," she murmured, brushing a stray lock of hair from my face. "Do you ever wonder what it would be like to stop pretending?" My breath hitched. Her fingers traced the curve of my wrist, slow and deliberate. It was wrong. Every fiber of my being screamed at me to walk away, to remember who I was. But I didn't. Lila watched me with an almost predatory stillness, like she was waiting for me to break. The worst part was I wanted to. My voice caught in my throat. She smiled, slow and knowing, before leaning closer. "Relax. It's just a drink," she whispered. And yet, it didn't feel like just a drink. Not when she tilted her head slightly, lips just a breath away from my skin. Not when my entire body tensed with anticipation. Somewhere in the haze of alcohol and tension, my defenses cracked. We talked, we laughed, and I forgot, if only for a moment, who I was supposed to be. At some point, she reached across the table, her fingers ghosting over mine. My breath stuttered. "This isn't you, is it?" she asked. I swallowed. "I don't know." "Yes, you do." Her voice was a quiet promise. A dare. I should have left. But when she stood, offering her hand, I took it. The hotel wasn't far. The elevator ride was silent, except for I could see our reflections in the mirror-lined walls. Her standing close behind me, her gaze steady, mine unraveling. The second the doors closed behind us, I felt the heat of her breath against my ear. "Last chance to walk away, Jade," she murmured. I turned to face her, searching for hesitation in her eyes. I found none. Neither did I. I kissed her. It wasn't soft or tentative. It was desperate, messy, filled with the weight of everything I had denied myself. Her hands tangled in my hair as she pressed me against the wall, her body molding against mine. I gasped when her lips trailed down my jaw, her fingers tracing the strap of my dress before slowly, tortuously, slipping it off my shoulder. "This is what you wanted, isn't it?" she whispered against my skin. I couldn't answer, because the truth was I had never wanted anything more. And in that moment I wasn't Ethan's wife. I wasn't the perfect woman everyone expected me to be. I was just Jade. And I had no idea that I had just walked into a carefully laid trap. The morning after should have been filled with regret. Instead, I woke up tangled in silk sheets, the scent of Lila's perfume still clinging to my skin. The room was dim, the curtains drawn, allowing only a sliver of daylight to pierce through. My body ached in a way that felt both foreign and exhilarating. For a moment, I didn't move. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, trying to reconcile the woman I had been last night with the one I was supposed to be. I was Ethan's wife. But last night, I had let another woman undress me, kiss me, consume me. The mattress shifted, and I felt the warmth of Lila's body move beside me. "You're awake," she murmured, her voice thick with sleep. I turned my head and met her gaze. She was watching me with a lazy smirk, her bare shoulder exposed above the sheets. The evidence of everything we had done still lingered between us. I swallowed hard. "I should go." Her smile didn't falter. "You could. Or you could stay." I sat up, pulling the sheet around me as if it could shield me from the reality of what I had done. This was a mistake. Lila propped herself up on her elbow, studying me. "Is that what you really think?" I wanted to say yes. I wanted to tell her that last night was nothing but a lapse in judgment, a drunken mistake. But the words wouldn't come. Because it hadn't been just the alcohol. It hadn't even been just Lila. It had been me. She reached out and ran her fingers down my arm, sending a shiver through me. "You don't have to lie to me, Jade. I know what I saw last night." I forced myself to move, slipping out of bed and searching for my clothes. My dress was crumpled on the floor. My heels discarded somewhere near the door. Everything about this room this morning felt too intimate, too dangerous. Lila watched me dress, making no effort to cover herself. She was completely at ease, as if this was just another morning for her. Maybe it was. "Are you going to tell him?" she asked casually, sitting up. I froze. The weight of her question hit me like a punch to the gut. I turned slowly. "Tell Ethan? Are you insane?" Her smile widened. "So that's a no." I exhaled sharply, running a hand through my hair. "This never happened." Lila tilted her head, amusement flickering in her eyes. "If that's what you need to tell yourself." I grabbed my purse and headed for the door, my pulse pounding. I needed to get out of there. Needed to pretend that last night had been some fever dream I could wake up from. But just as I reached for the handle, Lila's voice stopped me. "Jade." I hesitated. "You're going to come back." I turned my head just enough to see her, sitting there in the bed, a knowing look on her face. It wasn't a question. It was a promise. I didn't answer. I just walked out. The drive home was a blur. My hands gripped the steering wheel too tightly, my mind racing with thoughts I didn't want to acknowledge. I told myself I would shower, scrub away the guilt, and slip back into my perfect life. But the second I stepped into the house, I knew something was wrong. Ethan was home. He wasn't supposed to be. His trip was meant to last another 2 days. But there he was, sitting in the living room, looking up at me with unreadable eyes. "Hey," I said, forcing a smile. "I thought you weren't getting back until Thursday." He set down his glass. "Change of plans." I nodded slowly, walking toward him. Every step felt heavier. I was hyper-aware of my body, of the faint trace of Lila's perfume still clinging to my skin. Ethan studied me, his gaze lingering a second too long. "Where were you?" I swallowed. "Just out with some friends." A pause. "Friends?" "Yeah." I forced a laugh, hoping it didn't sound as hollow as it felt. Had a few drinks, lost track of time. Ethan didn't say anything. He just kept looking at me, his expression unreadable. Something was wrong. I could feel it in the air, in the way he held himself. Ethan was always composed, always sure of himself. But now there was something in his posture, something tight, controlled. I sat down beside him, pressing a kiss to his cheek. "I missed you." He didn't react immediately. Then slowly he turned to me and smiled. But it didn't reach his eyes. "Me too," he said. A chill ran down my spine. Because at that moment I realized something. Ethan knew. Ethan knew. The realization settled deep in my stomach, cold and paralyzing. I could see it in the way he held himself. in the way his fingers curled around the edge of his glass a little too tightly. He wasn't angry, at least not visibly. But that was the thing about Ethan, he never exploded. His anger was quiet, controlled, precise. I forced myself to stay calm to keep my breathing even. "Are you okay?" I asked as casually as I could manage. He took a slow sip of his drink, watching me over the rim of his glass. "I should be asking you that." "A test." I smiled, pretending I didn't feel the walls closing in. "I'm fine. Just tired." Ethan nodded, setting his glass down. "Late night, huh?" Something in his tone sent a chill down my spine. It was too smooth, too careful. I had spent years learning the subtleties of his moods, and right now, he wasn't just making conversation. He was hunting. "Yeah," I answered, keeping my voice light. Like I said, I lost track of time. His eyes flicked over me, taking in every detail. Could he smell Lila on me? Could he see the ghost of her fingers on my skin? I forced myself to move, to act natural. "I'm going to shower." Ethan didn't stop me, but as I turned to leave, he spoke again. "By the way, I ran into an old friend while I was away." I froze mid-step. My fingers clenched around the strap of my purse. "Yeah?" I asked, my voice painfully neutral. "Yeah." A pause. "Lila." Ice spread through my veins. I turned back to him slowly, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Oh." Ethan leaned back against the couch, his expression unreadable. "Funny, right? What are the odds?" I swallowed, my throat suddenly dry. "I didn't know you two still kept in touch." His lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "We don't." "Not really. But she found me." "What did she want?" Ethan studied me for a moment, then shrugged. "Just to talk. Catch up." I nodded slowly, but my mind was spiraling. Lila had said nothing to me about seeing Ethan. She had made it seem like she barely acknowledged his existence. But she had sought him out. Why? I could still feel his eyes on me as I turned and walked upstairs, my pulse a frantic drumbeat in my ears. The moment I was inside our bedroom, I shut the door and exhaled shakily. I stripped off my clothes and stepped into the shower, letting the hot water pound against my skin. I had to think. If Lila had told Ethan about us, he would have confronted me, wouldn't he? But no, Ethan wasn't impulsive. He was strategic. He knew. He wouldn't lash out. He would wait, let me dig my own grave. I ran my hands over my face, my mind reeling. What the hell was Lila playing at? I had barely stepped out of the shower when my phone vibrated. A message from her. "Miss me yet?" My fingers tightened around the device. I didn't respond. Instead, I got dressed and went downstairs, acting like everything was fine. Ethan had moved to the dining room, scrolling through his phone, the remnants of his drink still on the table. He looked up when I entered. "I was thinking we should have dinner with my parents tomorrow." I blinked. Ethan rarely suggested family dinners. His relationship with his parents, particularly his mother, was complicated. "Oh?" I asked carefully. He nodded. "Mom's been asking about you." Something about the way he said it made my skin prickle. Ethan's mother had never liked me. She was cold, distant, always watching me with thinly veiled disapproval. It had never made sense to me. On paper, I was the perfect daughter-in-law. Educated, successful, devoted to Ethan. And yet from the moment we met, she had treated me like I was an intruder. A sinking feeling settled in my gut. Ethan was up to something. I forced a smile. "Sounds great." He smiled back, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Good." The next evening I dressed carefully. I chose a simple yet elegant dress, nothing too extravagant, but enough to present the perfect image of a loving wife. Ethan drove us to his parents' house in silence. His fingers tapped idly against the steering wheel, his expression unreadable. When we arrived, his mother greeted us at the door with her usual cool smile. "Jade, you look lovely." "Thank you," I said, my voice steady despite the unease crawling under my skin. Dinner was tense. Conversation was polite, but there was an underlying current of something unspoken. I could feel Ethan watching me, his mother watching both of us. And then, just as I was reaching for my wine, she spoke. "Ethan told me he ran into Lila recently." My fingers tightened around the glass. I forced a casual smile. "Oh? That's nice." His mother tilted her head, her expression unreadable. I didn't realize you two knew each other. My heart pounded. We don't really. We only met recently. Ethan's gaze was burning into me, but I didn't dare look at him. His mother hummed thoughtfully. Interesting. A heavy silence stretched between us. I set my glass down carefully. How do you know her? She smiled faintly. Lila used to be quite close to our family. She and Ethan, well, they had a history. I forced a laugh. Oh? I had no idea. Ethan finally spoke, his voice smooth. Yeah. She was part of my life a long time ago. There was something in his tone, something weighted. His mother stirred her drink lazily. It's funny though. The way she suddenly reappeared after all these years. Almost like she was looking for something. The room felt suffocating. I finally turned to Ethan, searching his face for any clue as to what he was thinking. He simply held my gaze, his expression unreadable. Almost like she was looking for someone. His mother corrected. The air in the room shifted. Cold, paralyzing fear wrapped around my spine. Ethan knew. And worse, so did his mother. I couldn't breathe. Ethan's mother sipped her drink. Her eyes steady on mine. As if she could peel back my skin and see the filth underneath. My hands felt clammy against my lap. My throat suddenly dry. Ethan knew. His mother knew. But how much? I forced myself to smile. As if the weight of the room wasn't suffocating me. Well, I suppose it's always nice to reconnect with old friends. Ethan tilted his head slightly. Is that what you and Lila are? Friends. My pulse spiked. I laughed, light and effortless, the way I always did when I lied. Not really. We've only spoken a few times. Ethan didn't blink. Right. A few times. There was something sharp in his voice, something that made my stomach churn. I picked up my glass, taking a slow sip of wine to steady myself. Ethan's mother set her fork down. Her gaze still fixed on me. You know, Lila was almost family. I nearly choked on my drink. Ethan leaned back in his chair, swirling the dark liquid in his glass. Mom, he said mildly. What? She gave a slow shrug. It's true. There was a time when everyone thought you two would end up together. I swallowed hard, forcing a smile. I guess life had other plans. She hummed, tilting her head. Yes. And yet here she is. Back in Ethan's life. And yours too, apparently. This wasn't a conversation. This was an interrogation. Ethan's mother had always been calculated. But tonight she was sharper than ever. And Ethan, he was letting it happen. Watching. Studying me like a specimen under a microscope. I felt like I was drowning. Excuse me, I said softly, pushing my chair back. I just need to freshen up. I didn't wait for permission. I walked out of the dining room and into the hallway, my legs stiff, my breath shallow. The bathroom door clicked shut behind me, and I gripped the sink, staring at my reflection. My skin was pale, my pupils wide, my lips pressed into a tight line. They knew. They had to. I pulled my phone from my purse with trembling fingers. A message from Lila. Did you like my little surprise? My stomach dropped. I typed frantically. What did you do? The 3 dots blinked. Then a response came. Just setting the stage, sweetheart. Don't panic. I wanted to scream. I deleted the messages, shoved my phone back into my purse, and took a deep breath. When I returned to the dining room, Ethan was alone. He looked up at me, his expression unreadable. Mom's gone to bed. I nodded, slowly moving back to my seat. For a few moments, there was only silence. The weight of the evening pressed heavy against my chest. Then Ethan spoke. Tell me the truth, Jade. My breath caught. About what? He leaned forward slightly, his elbows resting on the table. About Lila. I forced a soft laugh. What about her? His gaze didn't waver. Don't. The amusement in my expression faltered. Ethan. Ethan saw it. He always saw it. His jaw tightened and he exhaled through his nose, as if he had given me one last chance and I had wasted it. I know, Jade. My heartbeat thundered in my ears. Know what? He reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone, and tapped the screen a few times. Then he turned it to face me. A video played. A hotel hallway. Me and Lila. My hand on her wrist. Her fingers brushing my cheek. Then the moment. the second I had pulled her into that room. The blood drained from my face. My stomach lurched. Ethan watched me, his face a perfect mask of calm. "I wanted to believe you," he said quietly. "But I already knew." My mouth opened but no sound came out. I had been so careful. How could this have happened? I looked back at the video, my mind spinning. Then it hit me. The camera angle. The footage hadn't been taken from security cameras. It was a personal recording. Lila. She had set me up. I clenched my fists. My pulse pounded in my temples. I had been so blind, so stupid. Ethan's voice cut through my thoughts. "Tell me, Jade." His tone was quiet, almost gentle. "Did you love her?" I looked at him, my throat tightening. I didn't know how to answer. Because the truth was I didn't know. Lila had been a whirlwind, an escape, a temptation I hadn't been able to resist. But love? I had loved Ethan. I still did. Didn't I? My voice cracked. "Ethan, please, He didn't move. He didn't yell. He just watched me break. The silence stretched, suffocating, unbearable. Then finally he spoke. "Pack a bag." I froze. "What?" His expression remained unreadable. "You're leaving." Panic surged in my chest. "Ethan." His voice was colder now. "I don't want to look at you, Jade. Not tonight. Maybe not ever." I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. "I made a mistake," I whispered. He gave a hollow laugh, shaking his head. "No. A mistake is a drunken kiss at a party. A mistake is something you regret the moment it happens." His eyes darkened. This was a choice. Repeat it. Deliberate. Tears burned my eyes. "I love you." For the first time all night. Real emotion flickered in his expression. A flash of something raw, something painful. But it was gone just as quickly. "Pack a bag," he repeated, his voice empty. "And get out." I knew then that I had lost him. I had played with fire. And I had burned everything down. I stood frozen in place, my heart hammering against my ribs. The words hung heavy in the air, suffocating me. "Pack a bag. And get out." Ethan's face was unreadable, his jaw tight, his knuckles white where they rested against the table. He wasn't yelling. He wasn't throwing things. That would have been easier. But this unbearable calm was so much worse. I wanted to beg, to plead, to tell him I was sorry. But what good would it do? The proof was right there, replaying on the phone screen, over and over like a sick joke. Me and Lila. The way I had looked at her. The way I had let her pull me into that room. I swallowed hard, my voice barely a whisper. "Ethan, please." His eyes flicked up to mine, but there was nothing left in them. "No words. No love. Don't," he said simply. "Just go." A lump formed in my throat, but I forced myself to move. My legs felt like lead as I turned away from him and walked up the stairs. Each step was torture. My hands trembled as I pulled an overnight bag from the closet, stuffing it with whatever I could grab. A pair of jeans, a sweater, my toothbrush. It was surreal, packing up my life in mere minutes, as if I were nothing more than a guest in this home. Our home. I pressed a hand to my mouth, trying to stifle the sob that threatened to escape. I didn't want to leave. I didn't want to lose him. But I already had. I zipped up the bag and turned, only to find Ethan standing in the doorway. His face was blank, but his eyes, they weren't empty anymore. They were filled with something raw, something shattered. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he asked, "Why her?" I swallowed hard. I don't know. It wasn't a lie. I truly didn't. Lila had been a storm that had swept through my life, pulling me into her chaos. It had started as a temptation, a reckless mistake, but somewhere along the way, it had turned into something else. Something dangerous. Ethan let out a quiet, bitter laugh. "You don't know." He shook his head. "That's not good enough, Jade." I took a shaky step forward. "Ethan, I love you." His jaw clenched. "You don't do this to someone you love." I flinched. He was right. I had ruined us. And for what? I reached out, desperate to touch him, but he took a step back. The distance between us had never felt so vast. "Go," he said again. His voice barely above a whisper. Tears blurred my vision as I nodded. I walked past him down the stairs through the front door. The cold night air bit at my skin, but I barely felt it. I had barely reached my car when my phone buzzed. A message. From Lila. How did it go? My fingers curled around the phone, my breath shaky. I could still hear Ethan's voice in my head, telling me to leave, telling me that love wasn't supposed to feel like this. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt something different. Rage. Lila had orchestrated all of this. She had played me like a puppet, pulling the strings with that wicked smile of hers. And I had let her. I wiped at my eyes, my hands shaking as I typed my response. You set me up. The 3 dots appeared. Now, sweetheart, don't be dramatic. I clenched my teeth. Why? This time she took her time answering. Because you took something from me. And I wanted to take something from you. The words settled in my stomach like lead. I should have known. This had never been about passion. It had never been about love. It had been about revenge. Lila had never wanted me. She had wanted to destroy me. And she had succeeded. I choked. Bitter laugh escaped my lips. I had lost everything. And for what? A fantasy? A lie? I stared at the phone, my vision swimming with unshed tears. Then, without thinking, I deleted her messages. And I blocked her number. I didn't want to see her face again. I didn't want to hear her voice. I didn't want to give her the satisfaction of knowing she had won. Because she had won. But that didn't mean I had to let her keep playing the game. I gripped the steering wheel, inhaling sharply. This wasn't the ending I had imagined. But it was the one I deserved.